on your response to the cowbell. This is awesome. We have been asked the question by many of you as to your ability to get copies of things that you have seen and heard yesterday and so far this morning. The plan for this is in a couple of parts. One, we will produce a product. There is a study which Ambassador Downie and I are working on, and the summary of the colloquium and that study are probably going to be meshed very tightly together. We also are going to have the papers that all five of us will finalize after the colloquium, and that will be part of our product. Downie Mora has indicated that he would very much like to have his remarks to be part of the product. And so the Brader study summary is a document that we will put together. Now, in the interim, however, once I get the clearance from everybody, and that everybody is more Downie Mora than anyone else, that his remarks can be shared in a written form, then we will put together a CD with everything that you have seen, heard, and we will make that available. We have all of your email addresses, and if you have a question as to whether or not we do, please check with my assistant, Eva Baker, and because we will send that particular CD to everyone that is here and that has participated in the program. Now, I am hopeful that we can do that within about a week or so of this event. It's, as I say, it's largely going to rest on the ability of Downie Mora to let us use his remarks. If that doesn't happen, we'll leave his part out and share everything else. Okay, our fourth panel is chaired by the Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies, ably led by Richard Downie, Dr. Richard Downie, and he is about to take control and make me work for a living here.
Thank you, Jay, and good morning. Some nice greetings to all of you out there. I can feel that enthusiasm just generating, surging throughout this crowd here. Welcome to this panel on Latin American, U.S., and others' roles in strengthening military capabilities. And thank you, Jay. It is a real honor. As Jay mentioned, I'm Richard Downie, Director of the Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies, and it is a great honor for us at the Center to be one of the co-sponsors of this 15th annual colloquium, and I should say this is a big year for 15ths. This is also CHDS's 15th anniversary in September, so this is our, as I say, a big year for 15ths. But we're particularly honored to be able to coordinate this panel on strengthening military capabilities because one of the missions that CHDS has had for years is that of helping to strengthen and build partner capacity. And that's because it's been one of our defense strategy objectives for years, and I think it continues to be, but that mission has been revalidated. Most recently, some of you have seen Secretary Panetta's recent defense strategic guidance. This was put out in January of this year, 2012, entitled Sustaining U.S. Global Leadership, Priorities for 21st Century Defense. And he talks about the need to continue to build partner capacity to help with, to share both the responsibilities and the burdens of leadership in confronting the challenges that we face. But more than that, something that he says that is really key here in this document, and I know, yes, this is the same document that those of you are aware of this, that says that U.S. focus is shifting towards the Asia-Pacific. And yes, it's the same doctor that says, and oh, by the way, yes, we're also engaged in Africa and Latin America. Yes, this is that document. But he does talk about the fact that specifically in our region, that there is a great need for new, innovative approaches in this area of building and strengthening partner capacity because of the challenges that we face. And so what we're talking about here is really the essence of that piece of our strategy, but not just for us, for all of us in this region, and I'll get into that in a moment. But, given the challenges that we face in our region, and I thought Ambassador Villagrán did a wonderful job of laying out some of those challenges in Central America this morning. But when you talk about building and strengthening capacity, there are those here in this room, in fact, I won't mention any names, but either have written on or spoken about the fact that whether the military should or should not be involved in building capacity, or to whom they should or should not help in this regard. There are also people like Moises Naim, the former editor of Foreign Policy, who say that the security challenges that we face today are so dramatic and so difficult that they really go outside the realm of what we would consider a public security problem that the police might take care of, that these enter into national security threats that really have to be addressed in a different way through new approaches that involve the entire government. And so really what we're talking about today in this panel is quite a hot topic. And what we'll address here is, again, not just what the U.S. does, but what others are doing in this realm. We're very fortunate to have with us three very experienced panelists in this regard. And what we'll talk about is first a conceptual approach to this, particularly along the lines of what Secretary Pineda has said, what new innovative approaches are, and that'll be done by Jay Cope, who is no stranger to you. But one of the things you may not know about Jay Cope, and it's something that we're very proud about, is that we consider him our originating director at CHDS, because Jay was the one who did all the coordination and all of the setting up of the center before Margaret Daly Hayes took over as what we call founding director. So we are very proud of the role that Jay has had, and he will be talking about some of those innovative conceptual approaches towards the way ahead. And then we will have two gentlemen who will give their focus on important case studies in this realm of building capacity. And the first is Commander Rolando Ramirez, who is the chief of the Mexico branch in J9 at the U.S. Northern Command. And you certainly have all their biographies in your folder, so I won't go in detail. But one of the things that NORTHCOM is doing, and actually Commander Ramirez is really focused on this, is that building that relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. And for those of you who have not followed Mexico recently, what I think you'll be hearing from him will surprise you. Some of the initiatives that and the U.S. Northern Command, in terms of the military-to-military relationship, has been in the lead, have been absolutely astounding. And for those people who followed Mexico in the past, would have seemed inconceivable until this current administration of President Calderon. And we look forward to hearing about that. And he'll be followed by General Retired Carlos Ospina, who is also a professor and holds our Chief of Defense chair at the Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies. He was also former Chief of Defense in Colombia during the Uribe administration, and I don't mind saying that he had a huge role in the transformation that Colombia undertook in those last 10 years. And he'll be addressing the Colombian capacity building. And for those of you who don't know, as I mentioned, what we do in the United States building capacity, we certainly do what we can, but Colombia has had tremendous experience, and their success is something that we're trying to highlight and bring to other countries. And Colombia has worked with us and with other countries in building capacity as well. So each of our panelists will have about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll have a period of questions. So we'll lead off first with Jay, followed by Commander Ramirez, and then General Ospina. Jay, please.
Thank you, Dick. Yeah, by asking the question, how should we rethink hemispheric security and strategy 10 years after the OAS Declaration of Security in the Americas, Ambassador Einaudi and I hope to challenge our paper writers, and which includes ourselves, as well as our panelists, as well as participants in a preliminary workshop in early March, which launched the study, and here at this particular colloquium, which closes the study. So we hope to put some things out there that cause you to think and help us wrestle with that fundamental question. We developed 5 themes, 3 of which were discussed yesterday. They were more regional and geopolitical in their nature. The 2 themes that will be focused today are really more U.S.-centric, although not uniquely, only solely U.S.-centric, but they are focused more on the United States. And so it's particularly nice to launch the very first one, the title of which implies the first military cooperation among states, which is hardly a new idea. Cooperation is a concept that is often discussed in the context of regional security challenges, but it's very infrequently achieved. The concept is, to quote Ivelaw Griffith, he used the term yesterday, one of his platitudes that we talk about. Nice things to say, but do we really realize it? In this particular paper that I'm writing, cooperation is intended to strengthen military and perhaps defense capacities, which suggests one or more countries have institutions that are poorly prepared to face a serious threat to their national stability, and they need outside support. This is a new topic. In the past, geopolitical considerations and distrust among neighbors would have precluded addressing anything about military cooperation to build capacity. Moreover, though, governments always had the United States to which it could turn. Since the beginning of the Cold War, the United States came to believe that it was destined to assist on matters of Latin American and Caribbean security because no one else was willing or capable. We have, unfortunately, still got that mindset in this patron-protege mindset. It's not quite as broadly felt today as it used to be, but it unfortunately is still there. Developing my theme, I believe we're at a turning point in security. I'm reminded of Winston Churchill's oft-quoted warning on the eve of World War II. He observed, the era of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to a close. It is a place we are entering, in its place, we are entering a period of consequences. While not the same magnitude that England faced, today's growing challenge by organized crime nonetheless has produced a period of grave consequences for national sovereignty, citizen safety, the rule of law, and ravages of terrorism. The conditions are getting worse with few examples of success. Transnational criminal organizations have not been deterred, cannot be ignored, or countered by individual countries or agencies of government acting alone. All nations of the hemisphere are struggling in varying degrees against resilient, agile networks with millions of dollars to spend, their own dangerous culture and values, and the ability to control large expanses of territory in the interest of their business. Most recently, the steadily deteriorating security situation in Central America has led the presidents of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala to employ the country's armed forces to reinforce law enforcement and combat crime. This has occurred in other countries as well. As in Central America, leaders often find that they must ask for outside support to strengthen and modernize the capacities of their defense ministries and armed forces. Traditional professional mindsets, as well as legal and operational instruments, have been found to be inappropriate or antiques that do not offer solutions to the problems societies face. There is a need for better doctrine and more appropriate tools and procedures. Many countries need them quickly. Capacity building or information sharing is not a new security objective for the United States. There are numerous examples of how the Defense Department has pursued it. The International Military and Education Program is the core of how we have been doing this for over 40 years. The UNITAS series of Navy-to-Navy exercises recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. Southern Command began employing engineering and humanitarian assistance exercises and smaller deployments for training in support of this policy in the early 1980s. The list goes on. This is not new for the United States. It is a fair question to ask how much capacity actually has been built by these initiatives. I believe there has been modest success in some countries, particularly if the armed forces capitalized on the experience, which unfortunately has not always been the case. Often the outcome has been more to emphasize personal relationships than really capacity building. Today, capacity building is still an important objective, but the funding has been markedly reduced, forcing the state and defense departments to rethink the objective, not on its merits, which are laudable, but in regard to what capacity building really is required and how it should be done. The way forward begins by asking what has changed in the regional strategic thinking and what has remained static. Neither consideration is necessarily negative. Drawing upon these trends, I will outline a few considerations to create positive momentum. Simply put, my argument is that the expansion and strengthening of defense and military capacities in the hemisphere, where necessary, is no longer solely the domain of the United States, which still tends to see itself as the main actor. Conditions have changed. There are more patrons to work with, as several Latin American and European governments find it in their interest to support bilateral strengthening of regional security. This presents the United States with an opportunity to demonstrate what equal defense partnership really means to us by finding ways to collaborate, in fact, with other countries in the pursuit of capacity building. The opportunity demands shared professional understanding of what is required, mutual trust in moving beyond traditional military training and exercise programs, which still have a role, but we have to move to serious operational cooperation with countries that agree. In my view, it is an innovative, low-cost, and small-footprint approach, to use the Secretary's terms, to a system of defense cooperation based on professional respect and confidence building that is essential to the long-range strengthening of security in the Americas. Put another way, I suggest that the United States, Canada, Colombia, Chile, and other countries willing to support capacity building should look for ways to work together in reality to achieve this end. The emphasis on real professional collaboration is the path to the future. What strategic thinking has changed in the hemisphere and what has not? To put security-related challenges in context, a quick look at a unique set of relevant defense and security trends is helpful. Let me just mention a few. The region is at peace in its interstate relations, but bilateral tensions over disputed territory are real. However, governments, especially defense and security sectors, are willing to engage in the pursuit of shared interests, and military institutions work together, and work together well, on peacekeeping missions and disaster response. National security no longer is defined in terms of zero-sum competitive strategies. Second, in countries and communities of states, even among traditional friends of the United States, a sea change has taken place. Governments are more democratic and willing to accept responsibility for their domestic problems. They also are inclined to reduce dependence on the United States and prefer to work with Washington on terms they help establish. Brazil's trajectory, third, as a global and regional actor, is gaining importance, making the development of bilateral defense relations a new priority for both countries. This led Presidents Rousseff and Obama to create the Defense Cooperation Dialogue, the first meeting of which took place in Brasilia 3 weeks ago. Fourth, the non-traditional security challenges are not unique to individual countries in the sub-regions of the hemisphere. We all face competition for undersea resources and related law of sea issues, climate change, humanitarian crises for natural phenomena that become more frequent and devastating, and most serious, the challenge of resilient, wealthy, and violent transnational criminal networks. Countries realize that they cannot respond to these challenges by acting alone. Secretary of Defense Panetta's May 13th op-ed in the Miami Herald, copies of which are out there still, mentioned by Daz D. Mora yesterday, focused on strategic change in the Americas during the past decade. His recent visit to Colombia, Brazil, and Chile convinced him that, quote, a remarkable transformation has taken place in the Western Hemisphere. Across the region, countries are doing more than ever before to advance peace and security within and beyond their borders, not only in the Americas, but across the globe, unquote. He went on to observe that, quote, in the past, the attitude of the United States was that it would have to act alone to guarantee the security of the hemisphere. This is no longer the case, nor is it our preference, he said, because we are stronger when we work with other nations to advance peace and security. But, to use Ivalaw's words from yesterday, is there a collaboration imperative in the United States? The challenge for the Defense Department is to identify mutually agreeable ways to work effectively and efficiently with security exporting partners, countries willing to help neighbors with disaster response and other problems. This has to be done, or should this be done, on a small or a large scale? I think the answer to that is a small scale, given the region's inability to agree on a mechanism to improve the effectiveness of military contributions to disaster response. We have been working on that since about 2009 and have not gotten very far. So I would suggest a small scale. What has remained static during the last decade? 3 trends, just quickly, are particularly germane. First is the security logic of the small states in Central America and the Caribbean. It is still shaped in part by relations with Washington, particularly aggressive and well-funded U.S. anti-narcotics and anti-crime programs which tend to drive decision-making. As Ambassador Anaudi mentioned yesterday in a Yemen context, this is still the same, at least in my view, that we are pursuing U.S. policy in the countries of Central America. Are we really, the question that I would like to pose, are we really doing the things that the country wants to have done? And don't have a good answer to that question always. The logic also reflects the weakness of government institutions in countries with unstable pasts, weak revenue sharing streams, the desire by some in the region and the United States to keep the armed forces in psychological exile. Heads of state generally have funded, heads of state generally have found that the defense of sovereignty, the recovery of national territory and other commitments in other communities living there, and the creation of safe conditions for socioeconomic development are tasks for which they don't have the capability in their armed forces and police to be able to realize. Complicating matters, states often lack comprehensive strategic vision for regarding their own national sovereignty and strengthening their rule of law. Ministries do not have the ability often to develop, fund, and implement integrated whole of government plans and programs that security exporting partners can support. In other words, having a vision that the partners can support. The second related trend recognizes that the political and defense officials in many American states appreciate that military involvement in law enforcement is not the role that they would like to see the armed forces assume. Deteriorating security conditions have forced leaders to take this step, but they would like to leave this particular approach as quickly as possible. Thirdly, there is a trend of persistent belief that governments can undo the influence, territorial control, and domestic violence of transnational criminal organizations solely by taking 3 steps: emphasizing the reform of law enforcement agencies in order to create safe streets, disrupt movement of criminals and contraband, to reinforce the rule of law. Second, eliminating high-value targets such as local cartel leaders. And thirdly, strengthening socioeconomic development. This approach reflects a tendency to want quick results while they have limited resources, which also is true in the United States. While quick start programs are important, they are difficult to sustain because they superficially address the deeper reality of improving security of citizens. The importance of the approach ultimately taken in Colombia, the success of which we widely celebrate today, too often is minimized or ignored. President Uribe's comprehensive national security approach, the democratic security policy, broadened the narrow police and development-centric counter-narcotics policy advocated by Washington, which in reality did not accommodate their security situation. In the second year of his administration, the United States began to catch on to President Uribe's clear hold and build strategy in which military, police, and civilians worked together. Colombia demonstrated that real development follows citizen security and a permanent state presence across the land. Standalone U.S. programs did not work well until they were integrated with long-term national programs following the government's lead. This general approach has merit when tailored to meet local conditions. It's amazing to look at Assistant Secretary of State Brownfield's remarks while he was ambassador in Colombia versus what he is saying today about CARSI and other documents. There's a world apart. There is no silver bullet solution for building defense, military, or intelligence capacity or sharing knowledge to face today's security challenge. In my view, however, there is a more effective and efficient answer with long-range constructive ramifications than simply turning to the United States for assistance as in times past, which many countries have done. The transnational, regional, and global threat faced most immediately by Central America requires an integrated regional, and global response. Accommodating these trends above, and for the United States, following Secretary Panmetta's strategic guidance that emphasizes innovation, low cost, and small footprints to achieve our security objectives, and working with other nations to advance peace and security is the way to move forward. Washington in general and the U.S. Armed Forces in particular have to adopt ways that engage friends beyond, not in lieu of, the traditional multilateral exercises and military teams that deploy for training. In today's strategic environment, the United States should actually work together operationally with one or more countries when requested. This has not happened often since the 1990s, but when it does, the relationship works. In 1995, for example, there was the military observer mission Ecuador-Peru, in which the United States collaborated with 5 other South American countries under a Brazilian commander. Each military found comfortable ways to make the relationship work. In the immediate aftermath of the Haitian earthquake, the close working arrangement between the U.S. military task force and the Brazilian-led MINUSTA was an invaluable success. I would include Southern Command's ongoing Operation Martillo, including naval forces from Europe, Canada, and the region, plus the United States, guided by Joint Interagency Task Force South. With the possible exception of Haiti, the size of forces involved in these examples has been small. Past experience suggests a framework for deliberate defense collaboration of a limited size in developing capacities for or sharing knowledge with countries in need of assistance. First, there has to be the political will among participating governments, particularly the host country, and a clear legal mandate for cooperation. In Central America, in the best case, the legalities could be linked to the objectives of the Central American Citizen Security Partnership and SICA's regional security strategy. Second, the countries collaborating to build capacity must have a common situational awareness and an agreement on how to move forward. Third, an arrangement for intelligence sharing is necessary. Fourth, a structure for personnel rotation and unified logistical support may be required. Finally, linguistic proficiency in cultural sensitivity is essential. The intent of defense and military support is to improve the sophistication of Central American governments and institutions by building capacities or sharing knowledge in 4 areas, in my view: defense advisory efforts, strategic planning, and force design. Second, intelligence-based operational planning. Third, doctrine development and training for military support to police with an emphasis on the rule of law and human rights. Under that rubric, we might consider the helping Central American governments consider the creation of constabulary forces within the Ministry of Defense. We, the Americans, tend not to have any experience with that. We've never needed to do it. But there are countries, France, Italy, Spain, that have, and there are countries in Latin America that have. So it is a good, perhaps, way to the future. A final area is military operations against well-armed criminal elements to regain and consolidate control of territory. With these 4 broad categories, there are a number of functional areas that may require attention. The collaborative effort would not address military resources. These are issues that should be addressed under long-standing bilateral arrangements. In sum, recent bilateral action plans with Canada and Colombia that were mentioned yesterday to coordinate national initiatives constitute an important step forward, but in my view, as part of an effort to rethink hemispheric security and strategy, the United States, Canada, Colombia, Brazil, Chile, other interested states should consider multilateral cooperation in support of nations that desperately need to strengthen defense, military, and intelligence capacities to counter the challenges of transnational criminal networks. The United States talks about defense partnership, but in reality, it is a detached kind of partnership that often puts a new label on an old bottle of combined training and exercises, which we do well. The future, however, is more demanding. The Defense Department needs to demonstrate that it can actually collaborate in operational ways with counterparts in the pursuit of common interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Now, we'll move on to Mexico. Commander Ramirez, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to come. My presentation is intended to provide you a brief overview of U.S. NORTHCOM security cooperation efforts with Mexico. I'll stress the word brief. There are numerous items that are going on, many of which Mr. Cope has commented on that I did not put in my brief for today. So I highlighted a couple of items just for conversation purposes. There are numerous other events that are going on based on components that are doing things or within the command that I just didn't happen to put in here. My intent is to give you a flavor of the types of conferences, seminars, training, visits, and initiatives that are occurring, ensuring that everybody understands that U.S. NORTHCOM does nothing here or sponsors nothing that is not associated with security cooperation specifically requested by the Mexican military via the U.S. country team. The Department of Defense is a trusted partner to law enforcement agencies for all efforts in Mexico, and U.S. NORTHCOM has closely aligned her efforts with the Department of State's Merida Initiative. That's one of the things everyone needs to understand. We are in a support role, as was mentioned by Admiral Atkins yesterday, so we can't take the lead in any events, but we do a lot of things in Mexico. Next slide. U.S. NORTHCOM cannot meet today's complex challenges alone, and as such, our allies and partner nations actively contribute to the cooperative defense of North America. We support and enable other agencies, advocate for complementary resources, and work toward common objectives to improve interagency planning and coordination that synchronizes U.S. government support for building our partner nations' capacities. These partnerships allow us to defend the nation in depth. As you'll read over our mission and vision statement, note the highlighted or the bold words, and that should come clear. Building partner capacity is a fairly open-ended phrase. However, when tied with the vision statement phrase, establish a comprehensive continental security architecture, it allows you to understand this is about more than countering transnational criminal organizations or drug traffickers. It involves things like trafficking in persons, money laundering, arms smuggling, piracy, etc. This is about a whole government response to partner with the Mexicans in deterring and disrupting all facets of these transnational organized crime networks. Next slide. As requested by Mexico, U.S. NORTHCOM collaborates with the Mexican military in support of their efforts to build capabilities and capacities to employ against transnational criminal organizations. Above all, U.S. NORTHCOM continues to respect Mexico's sovereignty and stands ready to increase coordination and collaboration to the extent that Mexico desires in accordance with U.S. government policies. By using the Merida Initiative as a basis for engagements with Mexico, U.S. NORTHCOM improves its collaboration with international and interagency partners to disrupt and reduce transnational threats to North America and provide greater regional security through a whole government approach. Listed here are the 4 pillars of the Merida Initiative. U.S. NORTHCOM security cooperation efforts accomplish its mission as a supporting agency to this initiative through equipment transfers and training events. Most notably here, people consider NORTHCOM's support in strictly equipment transfers. I'm going to show you here a lot of the things we have going on that are above and beyond simply transferring equipment. U.S. NORTHCOM is moving beyond this and continues to strengthen our partnership with the Mexican military through a robust subject matter expert exchange and training events plan. Next slide. To disrupt capacity of organized crime, a couple items are listed here. According to the DOS, the intent of this pillar is to diminish the power of Mexican transnational criminal organizations by systematically capturing and incarcerating their leaders and reducing TCO's revenues by interdicting drugs, stopping money laundering, and diminishing drug production. U.S. does this through equipment, technology, and training, as listed in the first bullet with the C-26 refurbishment. These aerial assets will provide valuable information to the Mexican military in their efforts against TCOs by providing a persistent aerial surveillance asset. The second bullet, the North American Maritime Security Initiative, NAMSI, was mentioned by Admiral Atkins during his brief yesterday. It focuses on interoperability, information sharing, exercise development, operational coordination, and protocols. A signed letter of intent by the U.S., Canada, and Mexico gives these militaries the authority to develop common checklists and procedures. One of the valuable parts of this agreement is the conduct of quick draw exercises, which are testing the capability of the U.S., Canadian, and Mexican maritime forces to conduct a joint response in illicit trafficking. We conduct 2 quick draw exercises per year to work toward establishing a common communication architecture. These work groups meet twice a year also to discuss these details, and then once a year all the flag officers meet to discuss what the working groups have done, and they provide further guidance to go from there. The Merit Initiative has also provided military equipment to Mexico. This includes 8 Bell 412 helicopters, 3 UH-60 helicopters for the Mexican Navy, 4 CASA 235 maritime surveillance helicopters, and 13 ion scanners. There are numerous other pieces of equipment that have been provided in support of the Merit Initiatives. These are just a highlight of a couple items we've done recently. Next slide. Sustain the rule of law has been mentioned on numerous briefs throughout yesterday and today. And the Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation fosters mutual knowledge, transparency, confidence, and cooperation among the participating nations, and promotes democratic values, respect for human rights, and knowledge and understanding of U.S. customs and traditions. Of note, this year there are 3 Mexican students in WinSec. Major Acosta has successfully completed defending his master's thesis, the topic of which was bilateral cooperation between the U.S. and Mexico for humanitarian assistance. He is the first of 3 that are going to be coming up to defend their thesis statement. The Defense Institute of International Legal Studies, DILS, supports U.S. foreign policy and security policy with legal training and education focused on human rights, rule of law, international humanitarian law, and law of armed conflict. They travel to partner nation countries to conduct courses, seminars, and workshops for foreign military officers, legal advisors, and relevant civilians. U.S. NORTHCOM military lawyers help facilitate, coordinate, and participate in all of these engagements with Mexican officers. To date, they've conducted over 130 of these events. They offer 10 resident courses in Newport, Rhode Island, and they help set up or help change the military justice system, building accountability and transparency into their existing legal structures in order to combat corruption, explain human rights law, and humanitarian standards. We've had several of these events that have gone on recently, and I think there's 2 more coming up at the end of this year. Part of this initiative also involves Canadian lawyers who are also frequently called down to either U.S. NORTHCOM headquarters or to travel down to Mexico to help support this initiative with DILS. Next slide. This pillar is intended to facilitate legitimate commerce and movement of people while curtailing the illicit flow of drugs, people, arms, and cash through better infrastructure and technology to strengthen and modernize border security at land crossings, ports, and airports. Some of the items that I've already mentioned to you were the equipment transfers. In this particular item of note, this will provide communication equipments for both on the U.S. side and on the Mexican side. So in the event any incident occurs along the border, U.S. forces can contact Mexican forces and vice versa to coordinate properly for incarcerating or capturing anybody who happens to be running that area. U.S. NORTHCOM is partnering with U.S. SOUTHCOM and Canada Command and working with military forces from Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize to strengthen ties and promote a coordinated approach to enhancing security along the Mexico-Guatemala-Belize border. With U.S. NORTHCOM and SOUTHCOM's assistance, our southern neighbors are fortifying this porous border region and reducing the flow of illicit traffic heading north. We just completed one of the workshops of late discussing communications, equipment necessary between the 2 borders, standard operating procedures, those kind of events that are necessary for those personnel patrolling these border regions to communicate and coordinate engagements amongst them. Colombia is an active observer for all of these workshops. And we conduct bilateral and multilateral meetings, conferences, and workshops for broader coordination in dealing with issues such as natural disasters, pandemics, and search and rescue. Next slide. This is intended to strengthen communities by creating a culture that respects the rule of law and undercutting the lure and power of drug trafficking organizations, build community confidence in public institutions, and strengthen and establish personal relationships between military leaders. As was noted earlier, security cooperation is more than just personal relationships. NORTHCOM is taken forth and doing exercises, equipment transfers, military training team events, subject matter exchanges. But one of the central items for all of this is, as my commander believes, personal relationships is the core to what we need to do as professional military members. So he is very heavily involved in these events. He works very closely with the U.S. Ambassador and his country team to ensure our efforts are complementary. Frequent phone calls and meetings help ensure NORTHCOM and the country team are always in sync on all initiatives regarding Mexico. And just about every time he visits Mexico, he always carves out time to meet the Secretary of National Defense, General Galvan, or the Secretary of the Navy, Admiral Sainz, for 15, 20 minutes to an hour to discuss current initiatives or future initiatives that they desire or are currently ongoing. The second bullet deals with the Surgeon General for building resilient communities. We have a pretty robust medical corps in Northern Command, robust in the sense they're very active and aggressive in coordinating with other units and other areas to do medical events in Mexico. Some of those happen to involve training events, information exchanges on post-traumatic stress disorders, training Mexican naval personnel on medical effects of ionizing radiation for the Laguna Verde area for the nuclear plant for training, information exchange on One Health, environmental health considerations, a collaboration of over 100 doctors from Canada, the U.S., and European countries. Sponsoring SAMAR and SEDENA, the Mexican Army and Navy officers, to attend aerospace medical conferences to discuss natural disaster responses, particularly in the realm of public health and dealing with infectious diseases. And the last bill was humanitarian assistance, also addressed by U.S. Southern Command on a lot of the training that they do for the countries within their area of responsibility. We also conduct with Mexico on humanitarian assistance, how they can better partner with Southern Command countries that are along that border, particularly Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and within internal to Mexico for any event that actually occurs. This ties in very closely. We just conducted a national level exercise, Ardent Sentry, where it did involve a hurricane that happened to hit right along the Texas border. And how would we, the U.S. Northern Command, work with the Mexican Army to coordinate and cooperate in that area to help out with search and rescue or help out with displaced citizens or provide food and water to any personnel in that area. It was the first time we had conducted this exercise with the Mexican Army. It worked out very well, so much so that within a week after that, General Galvan, the Secretary of National Defense for the Mexican Army, said that Mexico will take a much more integral role in the next year, planning for the next year's event. They liked what they saw, they appreciated what was done, so they're definitely going to be participating next year. Next slide. So I'll finish this off here with some keys to success. The military-to-military relationship between the U.S. and Mexico has advanced to unprecedented levels of cooperation. Today, Mexico and the U.S. are strategic partners, respecting the laws and sovereignty of our individual nations, and at the same time, facing shared challenges and applying lessons learned for all events. As you've seen in the previous slides, this interaction is more than just discussing U.S. and Mexico issues associated with transnational criminal organizations. U.S. NORTHCOM believes the mutually shared threat of organized crime networks is also a shared responsibility, and we believe the keys to success are listed above. Mill-to-mill relationships between our partner nations and the United States are critical. Synchronizing government resources and partner nation requirements. We've done this frequently by working very closely with the Mexican Army, the Mexican Navy, to address what desires they need, capabilities they need, capacities they need, what we can provide support for, and also working very closely with Canada Command to see where they can help out in those areas. coordinating with partner nations' militaries to complement and build partner nation capacity. Canada Command has worked very closely with us on this. U.S. Southern Command has worked very closely, and U.S. Northern Command military members have gone down frequently to discuss what they need, what they desire, what we can provide, and what comes out best